Welcome to Royal Legacy, where we will explore the rich athletic history and deep family connections of BYU sports. Join us as we honor the past, celebrate the present, and look forward to the future of the BYU Cougars.
How's it going, everyone? I'm Lauren McClain, and welcome to Royal Legacy, where we dive deep into the family connections of BYU sports. Joining me today are husband and wife, former BYU and NFL defensive back Derwin Gray, and former BYU javelin thrower Vicki Gray. They are the co-founders of Transformation Church in Indian Land, South Carolina, where he serves as lead pastor and she serves as executive director of spiritual formation and staff health. Derwin attended BYU from 1989 to 1991. Vicki from 88 to 1991. They married in 1992 and have two adult children, Presley and Jeremiah. Guys, thank you so much for being here with me.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. This is awesome.
This is going to be, hopefully we covered it all. That's a lot of accomplishments right there, even in that bio right there. So this is going to be fun. I'm excited. Let's start with how you both ended up choosing BYU as the place to further your athletic and academic careers. Derwin, you came from San Antonio, Texas. Why did your 18-year-old self choose Provo, Utah to come and play football?
Wow. My experience with BYU was this. Late on Saturday nights, I would be up and I would watch this team with a quarterback named Robbie Bosco, and they had a grumpy-looking coach on the sideline named Lavelle Edwards, and they were throwing the ball all over the place. But I had never thought about going to BYU. Then my senior year, late in the recruiting process, Claude Bassett, former coach at BYU, had recruited a player from my high school to go to BYU. So when he came, I said, all right, I'll go on a recruiting trip, but I don't really know what Utah is. I don't know what, Mormons, Latter-day, I don't know what none of that is, but I'll go. So I went, and Utah was beautiful. And then they took me snowmobiling on a recruiting trip. And after about an hour on the snowmobiles, I was like, listen, I don't know what any of this stuff is, but I'm coming to school here. I want to come to school here. But also, I was forward thinking in this process. I knew, number one, I would get a world-class education. I knew, number two, I would get able to play for one of the greatest coaches in college football history. And number three, I knew I could play early. But what I didn't know as a 17-year-old, that I would one day meet my future wife, that I would meet so many friends, that I would go on to the NFL. I had no idea. But as a 17-year-old, that was the primary reasons why I chose BYU.
That was definitely forward thinking. And who knew the snow, which deters a lot of people, is what got Derwin Gray to BYU. I love that. Vicki, you grew up in the beautiful but tiny town of Darby, Montana, which you probably have a lot of snow over there as well. So what led you to choose BYU?
Yeah, so because I grew up in a tiny town, like, as you say, no stoplights, it was really important to me I wanted to get to a larger, more populated environment, but I really wanted to be at a prestigious university. I did well in school, and so for me, it was really important. I was at a school that carried some weight, it had some gravitas to it. And so, but I also loved sports. Basketball was my first love, but I really wasn't good enough to play Division I. And so I got offers at some smaller schools, like Division II schools. And, but my higher priority was to be at a prestigious university. So it turns out my sister had gotten a job working in the women's athletic department. And Craig Poole was the track coach. The legendary Craig Poole was the women's track coach then. And she talked to him about me, and he was like, wait, she's thrown what? And so he reached out and started recruiting me. And BYU gave me the best combined academic athletic scholarship out of any other offers I'd gotten. And so it was like a no-brainer. And my sister was there. So
yes.
Well, also, let me brag on her a little bit, because she's not good about bragging about her. So she was an all-state basketball player, and she won the state championship in javelin in Montana.
Wow.
Because the coach was like, why don't you try it? She goes, all right. So she goes out and wins state. She was valedictorian in high school, and then went on to be valedictorian at BYU. So as you can tell,
wow.
I married up.
Vicki,
thinking.
I didn't know you're the valedictorian of BYU.
In the food science department. Yep. Mm-hmm.
That's incredible. Oh my gosh, I love that. So neither of you are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Provo is definitely a different vibe, a different culture from where you both grew up. Derwin, you mentioned your first impressions when you were being recruited by BYU, but once you started to integrate yourself into Provo and the culture here, what were some of your impressions?
Well, everybody was white.
That's fair.
There was lots of Caucasians, more Caucasians peoples than I ever saw. And then so I grew up around Black people, primarily Mexicans. And then there were some white people. So it was a whole different cultural expression. And then the LDS culture has its own different, unique vibe as well. Now, the thing about being a football player is most of your time, you are studying, you are preparing to go out and play. And so I had a built-in support system with my teammates and my coaches. And so the adjustment was not super hard, but it definitely was that first semester, like trying to understand certain cultural cues. And I didn't understand why people would use replacer words for cursing. I was like, you might as well just cuss because you're basically doing it. You're just putting a different word in front of what the other word, you're replacing an F with an S. You might as well say it. I don't understand it. So yeah, that was an adjustment. And then I had a teammate freshman year. He was 27 years old. So I'm 18. He's 27. His name was Jeff Franzen. And he had 4 kids and was married. I was like, this man, I'm like, dude, you're almost 30 with 4 kids. And so just learning about the LDS culture and, missions and those types of things. And so yeah, I mean, there's there's an adjustment phase, but my hardest adjustment was not LDS culture. It was the classroom. That was my hardest adjustment. So my first semester at BYU, I had a whopping 1.41 GPA. I mean, I'm not 2.4, 1.41 GPA. And so that first semester was like, some things need to change. And so I actually met her second semester, my freshman year.
Oh,
what?
It's 35 years ago today was the day we met.
Oh my gosh, really? Today?
In the RV on the basketball courts. Yeah.
Yeah. 35 years ago.
That is awesome.
January 15th, 1990. Yeah. And so when we started to date, she took me to a building on campus that I had no clue what it was. And we walked in and there were books everywhere and it was quiet. And I was like, what is this? She goes, the library. I'm like, so this is what the library looks like. And so I would try to talk to her and flirt with her. And she's like, look, I have to maintain a certain GPA to keep my scholarship. And so she wasn't talking to me. And lo and behold, I started to study. And then you know what happened? My grades went up.
Amazing.
And then before you know it, I was one of the athletes on the board with over 3.0 GPA. So she taught me how to study by ignoring me while flirting.
Always hang out with the smart ones. That was a really smart move by you. Okay, so now that you brought it up, I want to get into this because Derwin, you told the Deseret News the story of how you two first met at BYU. You were in the weight room. It said, I thought to myself, I hope she asked me to give her a spot. Lo and behold, she said, can you give me a spot? And I was like, yeah, I gave her a spot. And that was it. She walked off. But then you started playing basketball in the Smith Fieldhouse. And it sounds like she was a pretty fantastic basketball player. But Vicki, you had a boyfriend at the time. So you kind of put him off again. Hey, it didn't work out. You have to go through the bums to get to something better, right? So
you had to dig through the dirt to get to the diamond.
That's right. So then you said a few weeks later, you saw her in the hall. You asked her again if she had a boyfriend, and she said no. And then the rest was history. So Vicki, I want to hear from your perspective, since it sounds like you kind of kept putting Derwin off a few times. How did it happen from your perspective?
I mean, I really thought he was very cute. I thought he was very attractive. and he had a defensive back body. I mean,
hold on, Lauren, something happening on the inside. Woo, wee. Okay, keep on going, keep going. I like it. Keep going.
But I actually was getting out of a relationship with the day he asked me. And, but I think I said something like, can we be friends? The dreaded friend zone.
Yeah.
I was like, can we be friends? Partly because I did think he was attractive. And so I think I was probably waiting for him to ask me. I think it was probably like that next week when he's like, you still got a boyfriend? I was like, actually, no. So I was waiting for that. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So this is what cracks me up. Neither of you guys are members of the church, but you come to BYU, you get married, which is the most BYU thing you could ever do, right? So did either of you think you would come to college and find your spouse? Was that in the plans?
No.
No. So the first wedding I went to was my own at 21. So marriage and weddings was a foreign concept in my family structure and dynamic. So my family freaked out. We wanted to get married, not only because we were young, but I don't know if you notice, I have a better tan than she has, and so that caused some issues. But so organizational leadership is really important to us, and so we have a staff of over 50 people here at Transformation Church, and so culture is not just things you say, it's what you do. And so the LDS culture has a high value on marriage. And so for us, we benefited from that culture, that it wasn't strange that a 21-year-old and a 22-year-old would get married. Now, to our families, it was very strange.
Yes.
Yes. So we actually benefited culturally. And Mike King, who is the associate athletic director and a former LDS bishop, actually performed our wedding.
Yeah.
Wow. Was that because your families were like, hey, we don't, they didn't want to have a big part in it, or that just was your decision because you met there at BYU?
Look at us. We're like, we don't know. So he, at the time, was serving an internship in the athletic department.
Okay.
And so he had gotten a little bit closer to Mike King. And honestly, we were so clueless. I don't think we even knew we needed like a pastor or a bishop or anybody to marry us. We were just like, who can do this? Right.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
that's love right there.
So I think one of the reasons why we connected is because, we have the athletic background. We're both very hard workers. We're very focused, and also don't ever tell us what we can't do.
Yeah.
Like that's just raising the temperature to accomplish it. And so it was like, we love each other. We're going to get married. And that's what we did. It's like we found someone who connected at the heart and mind and soul at level to run around the track of life with. And so her dad, I think, put up like $800, and we had people making cakes for us. She borrowed a wedding gown. I rented a cheap tuxedo.
We got married at the Marriott downtown Provo.
Yeah.
They're the people who I guess they owned it. I don't know. They were managers. They were big BYU fans, and they were like, yeah, I think they charged us like $100 or something, and said, you just got ballroom to have your wedding in it.
Yeah, so we got married at the Marriott downtown Provo. So like we are almost like the anti 21st century Instagram engagement.
Yes.
I mean, so we are more about substance and purpose than outer stuff. And I think that's one of the reasons why, we're going into 33 years of marriage.
I love that. So that actually was like giving me the chills just listening to you guys talk, because I believe you're 32. You said 33 years of marriage. You mentioned that your work ethic, your desire to achieve was kind of what connected you to. So Vicki, how do you feel like when you look back on these 30 plus years of marriage, how has that desire to achieve and your work ethic led to such a successful family life and marriage and ministry?
I think the high achieving is important. I think the other component of that has helped us get where we are is we both have a passion for being about significance. Like, we want to live lives of purpose. And I think when we were at BYU, we were still figuring out what that purpose was. And for him, the purpose was really the NFL. Like, his whole life, that was what he viewed as success and getting out of the environment he'd grown up in. So for him, purpose was making it to the NFL and succeeding there. For me, because I'm like a high achiever, but I'm a perfectionist to a fault, right? I think there's this, like, I want to be the best at what I do. And just this innate desire to, like, for purpose, to, like, be a part of something bigger than myself, to have significant impact in important ways, not like frivolous, I guess you would say. Mm-hmm. Like, I want to be a part of changing people's lives. I want to be like, what really is impactful. So I think at that point, we didn't really know how we were going to find that or what that would look like. And it really wasn't until we got into the NFL. And we always joke that NFL also stands for not for long. And so about his third year, and we really both felt like, oh, the NFL is like going to be the greatest thing ever. And now we say, well, God sure set us up on that one, because we had achieved all these things that we thought were going to be the greatest ever. Like, I was the young dietitian of the year for the state of Indiana when he was playing for the Colts.
I was the RCA man of the year for the Colts.
So we achieved these things, but we're like, but it's empty. Like, you're just like, okay, now what am I going to achieve next? Right. And so I think God used all that to, like, reveal how restless our hearts were until they were found in him. And until we knew who he was and knew how much he loved us, that really began our journey of, like, real purpose.
Yeah, because ultimately, right, as human beings, we need four things. We need unconditional love. We need identity, we need significance and purpose. And a lot of our work ethic was fueled by those things. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, fans, for the most part, love what you do until you can't do it anymore. And then the cheers turn into boos. Mm-hmm. Identity as a football player can only last for so long. Significance in winning games, you can't win every game. And your purpose has to be more than just playing ball. And so when I discovered that, wait, Jesus loves me despite my record. He died for me despite my sin. You mean he gives me a new identity? You mean he gives me significance? Like, if Jesus died for me, how much more significance do I need? What could I accomplish to eclipse that grace? And then purpose. The purpose is whatever we find ourselves doing, it's to love God and to love people. But also the greatest joy in that love is introducing people to him. Mm-hmm. And so, so the NFL, that first year was hard. Mm. Oh my gosh.
We wanted to go back to BYU so bad.
Oh man, we missed BYU. We were beloved at BYU. It was tough. Second year was a little bit better. Mm-hmm. Third year, I was a team captain, but my soul was fussy. And it was that third year that it was kind of like, okay, this isn't enough.
Yeah.
There's more to life.
Yep.
And the more is Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Let's dive in a little bit to both of your spiritual journeys. So you're married your senior year, you graduate from BYU. Derwin, you're drafted in 1993, fourth round by the Colts. You played 6 seasons in the NFL, 5 with the Colts, 1 with the Carolina Panthers. And then you talk about this teammate of yours that you met during your time with the Colts, who influenced that religious shift in you. I just think it's the funniest story. Steve Grant, known as the Naked Preacher. Tell me with the type of impact he had on you and why it was significant at that time.
Yeah, so just so people listening can understand. So in 1993, I had a teammate with the Colts. He was a linebacker named Steve Grant. Every day after practice, he'd take a shower, dry off, wrap a towel around his waist, and he'd ask my teammates, do you know Jesus? Because John 17:3 says, and this is eternal life, to know the one true God and Jesus Christ whom I've sent. Now, I didn't know that then. So I'm asking the veterans on the team, I'm like, what's up with the half-naked black dude talking about, do you know Jesus? They said, don't pay no attention to him. That's the naked preacher. And so I wanted nothing to do with him. And one day he asked me, he said, Rookie D. Gray, do you know Jesus? And like most people who don't know the saving grace of God, I began to give him my resume of all the good things that I did. And he said, well, your comparison on whether if you're good or not is actually with God himself. So that's why Jesus had to come, because he is the ultimate good. And he died on the cross because we're not good. We're sinners. And by faith through grace, you can experience his goodness. Now, that hit me like it had never hit me before. And then it was a 5-year process of watching his life, of me recognizing I couldn't love her the way she deserved because I didn't love myself. I lived in such fear and anxiety of who am I going to be if I don't play in the NFL? And it was like I hit this moment of I have nowhere else to turn but to him. And so that day was August 2nd, 1997. It was training camp with the Indianapolis Colts. We're in Anderson, Indiana, after lunchtime at Anderson University. I was going back to my dorm room and I called her on the phone and I said, I want to be more committed to you and I want to be committed to Jesus. And I literally felt my conversion experience. Like I felt my born again experience. You know how like Latter-day Saints will say, read Moroni 10:9, you get a burning in the bosom.
Yep.
I didn't get a burning in the bosom. I got completely burned up in his love. I was overwhelmed. And for 3 nights after practice, I would just get in my bed and I would cry thinking, how could someone love me like this? So yeah, that's what got me going.
That is beautiful. And
now, I don't recommend people do that at work though, and be like the naked accountant.
Keep your clothes on.
Don't be the naked accountant.
Even if you're talking about Jesus, got to keep those clothes on.
That wouldn't be good.
So Vicki, you're living in Indianapolis, and Derwin has this religious awakening. What was happening with you at the time, and how did you react when he came to you and said, I want to dedicate more of my life to you and to Jesus?
Well, so actually, in a lot of ways, I was seeking before he was. I even really my last years at BYU, I was just really struggling with, I like to say it was just like a hole in my heart. Like I didn't know the love of Christ, and I was constantly, and that's probably where a lot of the high achieving came from, was I found my value, my purpose, my significance in what I accomplished, in what I looked like. I had an eating disorder in high school and college because it was so important to me that I looked a certain way. But those were all attempts at getting love, right? Or getting acceptance or recognition or what have you. And so the NFL hadn't completely let us down at that point. But one of the challenges for me was when we got to the NFL, I was used to accomplishing things like myself, right? And sort of being known for that. I'm not saying that's healthy, but when we got to the NFL, I was like a nobody unless I was with him. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yep.
Like it was, oh, that's Derwin Gray's wife or whatever. And I'm like, I don't want to just be known as someone's wife. Do you know what I can do? Right.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like rebellious deep down. And so,
she's a rebel.
And so, but it was part of my struggle is then it became really like that identity crisis. Like, well, who am I? Like if, and at some point you're like, okay, you can only achieve so much in this earthly life. Right. So I was really already seeking, and I had, one of my degrees at BYU was in clinical dietetics.
Did you hear that? One of my degrees at BYU.
Yeah. What?
It was just a double major. So international relations was the first one with a Spanish minor. And then I went through clinical dietetics. That's actually all part of the journey as well. So I had gotten a job as a registered dietitian once I passed my national exam and all that fun stuff. And I was working in the inner city in Indianapolis. And because it was important to me that I still kind of did my thing, right? That I was still like working and contributing. And I wanted it to be like, well, we're living off my salary. And, even though NFL salary was many times more than that. But there was another dietitian that worked in this health clinic in Indianapolis. And there was something different about her. And it was hard for me to describe. She was very kind, very loving, very patient. And the truth be told, as I came home and I said, there's this lady at work, her name is Karen. She's a really good Christian because like she doesn't cuss or anything. Yes. So, but I think she started to notice that I was seeking, that I was hungry, that I was looking for love. I was looking for something. And so she just would, just love on me. And one day I actually asked her a pretty weird question. I was asking her about like spiritual warfare and do you believe in like demons and angels and all that? So Lord only knows what was going through Vicki's mind at this point. But we're sitting in her office and I asked her that and she just kind of looks at me and she goes, well, Vicki, are you a Christian? And I said, yeah, I believe in God. And she just paused and she lovingly just said, you know, being a Christian is more than just believing in God. It's really having a relationship with Jesus Christ and believing that he's the Savior and that he died for your sins and then coming to know him and walk in relationship with him and trust him for your eternal destination. Well, when she's saying this to me, I can only imagine what my face looked like because it was a foreign concept. I'd never heard anything like that. Or at least it had never landed before, right? And so I'm looking at her like, I don't know what that means. And so she goes, here, how about this? And she wrote down a bunch of scriptures and she said, go home and read this. So that was really the beginning for me of like, okay, what does this mean? And then it wasn't maybe a few months after that I visited. When he would travel and go out of town for football trips, a lot of times I didn't go. It's just very hard for spouses to go on away trips, especially when you're like at the Raiders or the Bills or someplace with hardcore fans, right?
Yeah.
And so, I would always go to this really old traditional Presbyterian church because that's what I was baptized as a baby. Never went to the church, but I was baptized at 2 weeks old. And so I would go, and it was really my way of sort of checking off my good deed, right? Like I would be like, hey, this makes me feel good about myself. Like I'm doing what I should be doing. And one day I went in and there was a choir that was like up in the balcony, like behind me. And I would always sit in the back because I didn't want anybody to talk to me. I didn't want anybody to try to get my phone number. Like, don't bother me. I'm just like doing my thing. Okay.
Yeah.
And one day they finished out this service with this song. And the last line the choir sang was, he died for me. And they just hung it there, right? Like I could just hear it like echoing over my head. And kind of similar to what he experienced, like I just had this like, wait, like this dawning, this awakening of like, he died for me. Like he knows everything I ever did and he's forgiven me and he loves me. What? And at that time in my life, I wouldn't let anybody ever see me cry. Now I cry all the time. But I practically ran out of that church. I cried all the way home. I didn't want anybody to talk to me. And all I really remember is driving home was, if there is a God that loves me like this, I got to know him. I got to know him. I got to know about him. And that was really, in hindsight, we've tried to like piece together what happened when, because we didn't know what was happening. Yeah. But we think it was probably about 6 months before that happened with him at the dorm in Anderson, Indiana.
And I think that's incredible. All of this is happening kind of at the same time to the both of you. I mean, definitely not coincidence, right? I'm sure as you look back in this journey that life has taken you on, that's pretty incredible. So you retire from the NFL in 99. And then Derwin, you decide to earn a Master's of Divinity from Southern Evangelical Seminary in 2008. And then February 7th, 2010 was the first Sunday at the church you founded, Transformation Church. So how did you go from this feeling, this burning feeling of having this weight lifted off of you, knowing what Jesus Christ had done for you, wanting to share this with others? Because that's kind of what happens when you feel that. You're like, I want to share this with everybody, to creating your own church. How did that come about?
Yeah, so I like to say God set us up because neither one of us grew up going to church. And so when we had these experiences where we were born again and made new, we were like, this is the greatest news in the world. And so I got invited to speak at a youth event in 1999 in South Carolina, but I didn't want to go because I was a compulsive stutterer. And I just remember praying, just saying, God, send somebody else to go. I'll send money. You know, I'm a stutterer. I can't do this. And I didn't hear a voice, but I just sensed God said, if I can raise my son from the dead, I can raise your tongue to talk. But you have to go to see the miracle. And so Vicki and I went down. Our daughter Presley was little at the time. And I was sharing my testimony and crying everywhere. And then a bunch of people said, hey, we want to follow Christ too. And then people just started calling me to speak. And then Vicki and I decided to put our heads together, which means she put her head together and said, I'll organize everything and you go and speak. And we made it a nonprofit ministry called One Heart at a Time. So I would travel and speak. She would organize it. We both have a deep love for theology and learning more. So I went to school. But then about in 2005, both of us said, why is it that when we were not Christians, we could go into a nightclub and it was diverse? Black people, white people, Asian people, Latino people. But when we go into Jesus's church, it's all white or all black. And so as we began to read the Bible, we saw that the churches that the Apostle Paul started had Jews and Gentiles. So I know in an LDS context, Gentiles means a whole nother thing, but in a New Testament context, Gentile means non-Jews. Mm-hmm. So the early churches that Paul started were a mixture of people from all over the world. So ethnic reconciliation between ethnicities was a big part of the early church. And so we said, there needs to be more churches like that. And God goes, good. That's why I raised you guys up to do it. Wow. One of the cool things, and I don't know if this means anything or not, but we met on January 15th, 1990, which is Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday. Mm-hmm. And Dr. King had a dream, right? But before Dr. King had his dream, the King of Kings, Jesus, had a dream. And in the dream, we see it in Revelation 7:9. It says that every nation, tribe, and tongue is around Jesus worshiping him. So we shouldn't have to wait for eternity to do that. It can happen now. And so we believe relationships across ethnicities, because of the love of God, should be what the church is known for. The church shouldn't be more segregated than the nightclub. And so that led us to start Transformation Church February 7, 2010, which was Super Bowl Sunday. So
it all comes full circle. I think that's one of the most refreshing and beautiful things about the two of you, because I don't know if everyone feels this way, but I yearn for unity, right? Just of people, of everybody. There's something that is, maybe it's a non-Christian thing of divisiveness, right? I think that's when you feel that love for Christ, you want that unity, you feel that. So I love what you're doing. And I feel like that's very in line with those teachings and beliefs. But with that, I'm sure there's been a lot of challenges. I mean, anything you do is going to come with challenges and adversity. So Vicki, what are some of the challenges that you feel like you've experienced going from the shift from the NFL and to forming this church?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say the beginning of it was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. How are we going to do this? And so, especially because early on, we had found it was an old warehouse that it was actually an old batting cage facility that we found that was available for leasing. And it was basically the two of us and one other person at that time. And I'm definitely probably the more analytical, detail-oriented out of the three of us. And so here I'm trying to read this 30-page commercial lease. And I'm like, I'm a registered dietitian. We can talk about your protein levels, but I don't know how I'm going to do this. And so that was just like, to say stressful is an understatement. I mean, you want to talk about like stress, like at night, I was grinding my teeth. I chipped a tooth. Like, it was just a whole nother level. But what was really neat is as we were going through this process, God brought two men who were older than us, who had been a part of church leadership in other local churches here in the Charlotte area. And one of them actually had experience like reading leases and securing locations and things like that, just in time, like literally a week before we had to sign it. I mean, God's always right on time, right? And so God brought them to our team, and they were lifesavers for us. One of those gentlemen has retired. The other one is still a part of our executive team. And that's 15 years later. But really, that was kind of the beginning. And then you have one of the things, and you've probably experienced this, in the local church, people have a different set of expectations of people than you do, like, just say at your workplace, right? So we had to kind of learn a whole new level of expectations and leadership in a different way. The importance of like a healthy culture, like what actually is being done, what are the behaviors that are happening around you. So it was really like a fast track in learning is what I will say. And of course, in the midst of that, then you have other family things going on, right? Like his grandmother, who was like his mom, passed away during this time. My stepdad passed away, and then you have your own issues with your own children you're raising.
Yeah.
And so but that stuff doesn't stop. Right. And so I will say the level of stress was pretty high. But God has brought incredible people to partner with us in doing what we do at Transformation Church.
I want to mention your kids because, I mean, we've gone this far, but that's such a huge part of your life. You have to raise kids in the midst of this high profile career, and that can be challenging as well. So Vicki, how did you and Derwin manage to keep your family grounded, especially your kids, Presley and Jeremiah, as they got older and they learned to find their own identities?
Yeah. One of the things that I think that helps is that we are more about substance. And so we always taught them things like how you treat people is one of the most important things about you. You make sure that you look people in the eye and you give them a firm handshake, and just really, really, of course, those are sort of like just horizontal cultural morals, right? But it was important to us that they really, hopefully, as they were raised, we would really try to help them be grounded in who God says they were, more than what their peers, more than people around them said they were, for good or for bad, right? Especially with him being more high profile, like in the age of social media, right? That came with its set of challenges for kids that are going through high school, and they're like, oh my gosh, they don't think your parents are so cool at this point. And so we did have things we had to walk through with that. But we worked really hard to also protect them. And so with him being first high profile football player, then speaker, pastor, etc., we would always try very hard to protect our children from kind of like that fishbowl experience, like, hey, everybody's looking at you.
Yeah.
And we did the best we could. There would be times when he would be preaching a sermon and he would say, hey, just so you know, all our kids are sinners until they come to know Jesus. And so don't expect my children, don't put them on a pedestal. Like They're just like your children. They struggle with the same things, right? And so when he's talking about things we talk about, we would talk about that. And we'd be like, don't put pressure on our kids to be something because that's your expectation, right? And so we did have to work hard on that. And for us, it was also trying to keep the line of communication open, like preserve the relationship at all costs is what was been so valuable, because we now have a 28-year-old and a 24-year-old. So we've been through some ups and downs, but wanting them to know that no matter what, we are here and we love you. Even if we don't agree on things, we love you and we're here for you.
Yeah. And just to piggyback on what she's saying is time speaks love to your kids.
Yeah.
Time. So being at their events, also parenting their heart, not their behavior. I'm really passionate about this. And I think this is in the way in the LDS context, as well as in the Protestant context, is most parents want to scare their children into certain behaviors. If you do this, this is going to happen. If you do this, this is going to happen. That's not Christianity. Christianity is there's a God of grace and mercy who's forgiving and loving, and through the Holy Spirit's power is going to live in you. So I know in the LDS context, back in the day, there were the rings, choose the right. Mm-hmm. What we say is choose Jesus. And then you ain't got to worry about the right. If I'm choosing Jesus because of his grace and his mercy. The other thing is when they make their biggest mistakes, they need their biggest hugs. And for Father's Day a couple of years ago, my daughter wrote me a note and said, Dad, love you. You're a great dad. And I'm so proud of you. You've really grown. You don't parent out of fear as much as you used to. I'm like, that's growth. So apologizing to your kids, letting them know, hey, it's the first time I've ever been a parent, first time you've ever been a kid. Let's give ourselves grace. And so Presley is 28. She's getting ready to study in South Korea for 6 months. Wow. Jeremiah's a freshman at Penn Cary Law. And we're super proud of both of them, not just their accomplishments, but the people they are, the adversity that they've been able to overcome. And, you know, being a quote unquote high profile person, I don't say this much, and I just feel the Spirit's prompting to say this now, is like we've had people stalk our daughter online and try to basically digitally terrorize her. But what they didn't know is she could find them and reported it to their jobs. She was the wrong one.
I'm not the one to mess with.
She picked the wrong one. And like she found them, their street address. She knew where they were, sent all the information to their job, then have no more problems after that. But in saying that, though, it's hard. Yeah, it's really hard, but we're proud of the young man and young woman that they are, and we love them.
I love that so much. Yeah, being a parent is hard no matter what your job is, no matter where you live. I love that you said, because I try and say this, I have 2 boys. I try and say that all the time, just like, I am so sorry. I make as many mistakes as you do, but we're in this together. We're learning together. So good for you guys. I love that. It seems like you have incredible kids. Let's talk about your books, Derwin. You're the author of 8 books, including your newest book, Lit Up with Love, that comes out on February 18th. I want to know what inspired you to write this particular book, and what should the readers expect from it?
Yeah, so what inspired me to write this book is about 2 years ago, I found out that 3,500 Protestant churches close every year. I also know in an LDS context, there are fewer people. And so my thing was, how can I help people know how much God loves them? How can I help people grow in their faith so that they can share their faith? So one of the things that we both respect about the LDS context is people go on a 2-year mission. And so what we tell people at our church is you don't go on a mission. You are already on a mission. Your job is your mission field. Your school is your mission field. Your CrossFit group is your mission field. So what Lit Up with Love does is just the title of the book is I wrote it so that people would leave the book going, oh my gosh, I had no idea Jesus loved me this much. And I want to share that love with other people. And I share some BYU stories in here. I share our life story in here as well. It's a short book, as you can see, because I want people to read it, and then I want them to buy them for their friends as well. So it is sold anywhere books are sold. And as a former Cougar, I would love the BYU family's support. And just so every Cougar knows, all the proceeds go to needy children, our own.
Oh my gosh. I was about to say, wow, that is quite the donation. Hey, you do have one going to Korea for a while, so you need those donations.
Law school.
And law school. There you go. Oh my gosh. Oh, I love that so much. And again, that comes out on February 18th. Is that right?
Yeah. Pre-order today.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. I want to ask you both of this. I just have a couple more questions for you. But with everything you've accomplished and that you continue to do and being high profile, I feel like you can get your sights mixed up sometimes. Like, oh, this feels good. I feel like anybody gets a little taste of fame or anything like that. How do you guys stay spiritually connected and focused on your purpose as you have more and more people and followers coming to you and getting more well known?
Mm-hmm. So can I answer this really quick? So this is what I say to folks all the time. For me, for us, what is there to brag about? It's the word of God belongs to God. The gospel belongs to God. The people belong to God. The spiritual gift I have belongs to God. The air I breathe belongs to God. So in light of everything belonging to God, what is there for me to boast about? Mm-hmm. Absolutely nothing. And so I think we start on the wrong foot when we think I'm doing something. The beautiful nature of God's grace is, in essence, God is saying, I don't need your help, and your help you could provide is not enough. That's why I have to do it for you. All I need you to do is have faith and trust me to create in you and through you. And so there's nothing to boast about except, man, Jesus is great.
Mm-hmm. And I would say part of our vision at Transformation Church, it is based on the Great Commandment, where Jesus says you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and you should love your neighbor as you love yourself. And so we say it this way: upward, inward, outward. So I'm learning to love God completely, learn to love myself correctly, and love my neighbor compassionately, in that order. And so when you learn to love yourself correctly, what that means, it's not in a prideful way. It's learning to see yourself the way God sees you. So without Christ, we are dead in our sin, right? And so, but he values us so much that he died for us. So that's like inestimable value. Yeah. And so it lifts you up without inflating you, but it also humbles you without degrading you, right? Yes, and so you have this like, wow, I'm this valuable. And then when you see yourself that way, you live out of that, right? Like there's, it's kind of, he uses this example of like, when I'm wearing all white, I am not stepping in a mud puddle, right? Well, if I can see myself as the very righteousness of Christ because that's what he's given me by his sacrifice, then I want to live that way. I want to live like that person, right? And so that creates a level of humility, like none of this is us. It's all of him. And yes, he uses willing people, but it's all his. And these are the conversations we have all the time with each other.
Yeah. And I love that. And I think it's such an important message, especially for the youth with the Instagram age. And, you can put your stuff out anywhere, and it is very self-absorbed. I think a lot of today's just culture is being self-absorbed. And what can I get out of life? So I just think that's a beautiful message to look to God first, love yourself correctly, love others compassionately. I love that a lot.
Try it. Upward, inward, outward.
There it is. Upward, inward, outward. You got
it. Take that.
I'm going to. I like that a lot. I'm over.
Do it in sacrament meeting.
I'm over 50 young women here in my area, so I'm going to take that. I'm going to share it.
Do it. And in sacrament meeting, when the babies are yelling and people are falling asleep, just stand up and go, hallelujah, upward, inward, outward. I would pay money to see that.
As they escort me out slowly. No, I'm just kidding. All right, I'm going to bring this full circle because I know you have a good relationship with Kalani Sataki, Derwin, and he's such a great man, good man, and he's doing phenomenal things with the football program. So in the locker room, I bet you saw this after they beat Utah, Kalani gave a Christ-centered speech that focused on the importance of loving and respecting your opponents. He said, the guys you're playing against, they believe the same thing as you. That's why it's important to respect them and love them. And that's what tough guys do. He said it's important that we stay humble, that we love even our opponents. And that's the beauty of following Christ and living your life that way, even playing the game of football. So that's what Kalani's trying to do. He's trying to run his program with toughness, but with a high competitive nature. So that can seem like it doesn't fit together, right? So I want to know, an oxymoron. I want to know from your perspective, how can you be competitive and still love your opponent, as Christ says, which is what Kalani's trying to do?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is Kalani has become a real good friend over the years. I have tremendous respect for him as a man, tremendous respect for him as a coach, tremendous respect for what he's done at my school. You know, as a former player, you know, when I walk on the field or the locker room, my blood was a part of building it, right? Yeah. And so I want to see them be successful. And so his philosophy, love and learn, love and learn. So the first thing that I want to do is, with that question, is flip it. When Jesus goes to the cross, before he gets there, he's beaten with a Roman instrument called a flagellum. So a handle with a circular ring and leather straps with bone, glass, metal, anything, and it's ripping open his body. So you tell me if that's tough. Then he has to carry a cross through the streets of Jerusalem. I've been there. It's called the Via Dolorosa. You tell me if that's tough. And then he hangs on a cross for hours. And the high priests come to him and say, yeah, you're the king of the Jews. Why don't you get yourself down? There's another man guilty of sin who says, if you're the Messiah, get us down. Love kept him on the cross. Toughness kept him on the cross. So for some reason, we think that love is sentimentalism. Love is the highest good for another person. And that's what Jesus did. Now, flipping this to football. Loving my opponent means I want to bring the best out of you by bringing it to you every single stinking play. It doesn't mean that I'm going to hit you softly. I'm trying to knock you out, and then I'll help you up. Love is not flimsy or weak. Love is shaped like the cross. And so I can love my competitor. I can love who I'm playing against. And ultimately, for us, our theology is rooted in Colossians 3:23 that says, whatever you do, do it wholeheartedly as unto the Lord. So I want to play hard. I want to play fast. And I respect my opponent by playing them hard to bring the best out of them, right? Then you love and you learn. So one of the things I struggle with is if you beat another man on the field, another woman on the field of competition, I don't have to embarrass you. I don't have to gloat over you. I can respect you and dignify you. And the game should be a microcosm of how you want to live life. And so when I was on the sideline at the Alamo Bowl, because I ran out the flag, I'm not sure if you know that.
Yeah, yes.
In the town of San Antonio, I had one assignment from the Queen, and she said this, honey, don't get run over because you fall down. Just jog slowly. So I followed her advice until my hamstrings were like, you got more juice. And my back was like,
oh,
do it.
No.
I was like, yeah, I'm good. But what was really cool is when I was on the sideline, listening to how the players were talking to each other in a competitive environment, they loved each other. They loved their coaches. And that's when you get successful off the field, because you're going to be a non-football player a lot longer than you are a football player.
Absolutely. And one of the most beautiful things I saw, because you mentioned the Alamo Bowl, was Kalani and Deion Sanders meeting in the middle after. They go to battle during the game. They hug each other. Deion wipes his face off, because he had, I just am like, this is beautiful. This is how it should be. It's rarely that way, and you understand why. But it was just cool to see two awesome men show that as an example to a big portion of the country. I love that. Yeah. All right, go ahead.
I was going to say this, and what would be cool is to do like a historical 30-year study to see what players under those coaches do with the remainder of their life.
You should give that assignment to one of your really intelligent kids. That are getting the donations from your book.
That's right. Everybody, go buy Lit Up with Love, Derwin and Gray. Anywhere books are sold.
There you go. I'm with husband and wife, former BYU and NFL defensive back Derwin Gray and former BYU javelin thrower Vicki Gray. They're the co-founders of Transformation Church. Derwin and Vicki, thank you so much. You guys are just incredible. I know you're busy people. Thank you so much for taking the time with me today.
Thank you, Lauren. Yeah, thank you, guys.
Thank you. It's been fun.
Go Cougs.
That's right. Thanks again to Derwin and Vicki Gray for coming on the show with me. Tori Kimball helped produce this episode with senior producer Terry South. You can join the Royal Legacy wherever you get your podcasts, on Apple, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spotify, or on BYURadio.org. Royal Legacy is a production of BYU Broadcasting.